Creating a game that is a hybrid of genres may seem an easy and promising concept, but the reality is, the more genres you have, the more interest you need to cater to. And the more you need to cater to, the trickier the game's design becomes. You are no longer catering for just one audience, but a multitude of them, each having their own opinions and expectations on the genre that is drawing them to the game. It results in you having to present enough content and complexity for each of the genres you are introducing into the game, without creating an abomination. And if you don't succeed in this, you are going to feel the wrath of at least one of the audiences. And the game we're looking at today has felt the wrath of audiences, not because of game design faults, but through a mistake in classifying its genre. ValeGuard is an RTS and town management hybrid. Formerly it was classified as an RTS and tower defense hybrid, which was incorrect due to the missing core elements of the tower defense genre. ValeGuard is developed and published by the one-man dev team Ryan Drag under LostTowerGames. It initially released in early access May 11, 2018 and has had a full release as of August 28, 2018. ValeGuard's concept and gameplay are ideal for the more casual of strategy and management gamers, but the lack of mission variety and the basic strategy tactics of the game won't fulfill the need of more experienced of strategy players. The plot to ValeGuard centres around the land called the Vale that has recently come under attack by 3 Dark Lords, those being the Orc Lord, Skeleton King and the Demon Lord. As the ValeGuard, assumed to be the commander of the land's troops, you must lead the heroes and soldiers of the land, saving what towns you can from destruction, before making one last stand against the Dark Lords at the ruined fort of Ironhold. Under your command, will the heroes and soldiers of the Vale succeed in defeating the Lords, or will the entire land be laid to waste with all human life destroyed? Only you and your actions can determine the answers to those questions. There isn't really much of a plot when it comes to ValeGuard. Of what little there is, it is designed for the sake of building a world and player purpose. Other than that, it does the job it is intended to, but if you're looking for an intense plot of warring factions struggles, you won't find it here. The objective of ValeGuard is to save any towns you come across on your way to the stronghold of Ironhold, gathering what heroes and troops you can along the way. The gameplay is separated into 2 core elements, that being town management and RTS. Let's start with the town management. In each town you have a certain amount of days before the main enemy attack wave descends upon the town. During that time you need to manage every aspect of the town's preparation for that attack. That being building, making weapons, hiring troops, trading with caravans, gathering resources and making decisions with FTL style events. If all your heroes die or the town inn is destroyed, it is game over and you will need to start the campaign again from the very beginning. There are 4 resources in ValeGuard, that being gold, lumber, iron and food. Gold is used for specific events, hiring troops, trading goods and certain towers. Lumber is needed primarily for the construction of buildings but is also needed for certain types of weapons and some events. Iron is primarily used for making weapons along with some events. Finally is food that is required to keep the population of the town fed. Fail to do this and villagers become sick and eventually will die, resulting in you losing most of your workforce for resource gathering. How you gain these resources is you assign your workers to complete specific tasks each day. So if you want lumber, you place 1 worker for every 10 lumber you want. For iron, you place 1 worker for every 4 iron. If you need a specific weapon, you need to choose the weapon you need and place the number of workers in correspondence to the amount of that weapon you want, assuming you have the resources to do it. Farming works a bit differently, in that it takes 4 days for a crop to grow and harvest. During that time you must keep the same number of workers assigned to the farms, otherwise you will lose some of your crops, lowering the overall amount of food you gain from the harvest. As for gold, this can only be gained from specific town events, selling usable hero items and selling resources to the trading caravans that come to town, making it the hardest of the resources to obtain, but it is also the least used of them. At the beginning of each town you will only have a handful of workers at your disposal, but more is gained by building houses. The more houses you have, the more workers you have to gain additional resources. But you also need to keep in mind that the more people you have, the more food is required to feed them, resulting in the need of more farms and more workers to operate the farms. Success in managing resources is all about prioritising and making the right decisions at the right time as to how many workers you need and what resources you need them to gather. It is a case of making sure you have enough workers while being able to feed everyone and keeping an eye as the days approach ever closer to the major attack. The problem with the resource management and gathering is that because of how it is designed, it results in the same strategy being applied to every mission. That being build houses to gain more workers, build wells to increase the number of workers in each house, and collecting lots and lots of lumber, while keeping a few workers on your farm. That is essentially the tactics for the first 7 or 8 days of each town. After that, it is pretty much just working around what you need at the moment and circumstances you are in, and preparing for the final attack. It is strategy 101, and because it applies to every single mission in the game, it results in things getting repetitive. But with that said, it is functional, works very well, and is still a lot of fun. Though it is worth noting that it won't cater to the more experienced and hardcore strategists looking for complexity. As for building and hiring of troops, it is pretty straightforward. There are a handful of buildings available to you, those being stables, roads, along with the already spoken of farms, houses and wells. Stables are used for holding horses that can be mounted to specific units and heroes, granting additional abilities and faster movement. Roads are required for construction, where every building with the exception of walls and wells need to be attached to a road before it can be built. There are other buildings that you occasionally come across randomly in missions such as monasteries, graveyards and pumpkin patches that need to each be worked on to gain their rewards. They are a nice little addition that changes up the gameplay a little bit, giving an additional work task when assigning jobs, but more often than not their rewards just aren't worthwhile unless you're utterly desperate. So yes, the amount of buildings and the overall effect those buildings have on the actual gameplay is small. They each have their specific purpose, but those purposes don't do a whole lot to change up the gameplay. Then there is the towers, troops and heroes of the game. This is where things begin to get a bit complex from an explanation standpoint. How this works is what towers and troops are available to you is dependent on what hero you choose at the start of the game and what unlocks by choosing the various towns you are going to save. So depending on what town you're going to defend on the world map and the hero you choose at the start of the campaign determines what troops and towers are available for you to build and hire. Having the units and towers work like this is something I have difficulty in deciding as to whether it is a stroke of genius or poor design. Having such a system like this adds a layer of much needed replayability to the game, but also leaves you at the mercy of an RNG system that isn't always equal. There have been times I've had frost towers and ballista towers going into the final mission, and others where I've had nothing but archer towers, some walls, and a few more expensive units like berserkers. It results in you having to deal with the units and towers the RNG gives you, with some being quite rare unless you have the hero that grants you those specific units or towers. Working with bare bones is good for the strategy and tactics of the game, but then there are times where it hands you everything that makes the game too easy. Only having access to specific units and towers tends to also make the game feel shallow. Part of the enjoyment of strategy games is trying out the variety of units and coming up with a number of tactics based on the unit's strengths and weaknesses. Because of only ever having a few available at any one time, that isn't possible and makes the game a bit tiresome for those looking for a complex strategy. But for the more casual of strategy players, it suits very well, as it means there isn't a huge amount of complexity to deal with. As to the cost of the units and towers, that depends on their power. The units require a certain amount of gold and a number of a specific type of weapon. Some of the more powerful units and towers, such as the berserkers and templar units, frost and ballista towers, require a high amount of gold and weapons, resulting in them being much harder to obtain. Because of this, you don't get to use those more powerful units or towers often enough. Very often you don't have the resources needed, especially gold or the days to spare to gather them. With that said, however, when you do get to hire them, they more than make up for their cost. A little bit of balancing and tweaking between their cost and their power would be nice though. So yes, the hiring and building of the units and towers in ValeGuard have strengths and weaknesses. Strength in the form of replayability and strategy, weakness from the perspective of cost and chance of availability. As for the heroes, they were completely different. What heroes you gain through a campaign is determined by the town you decide to defend, with each town having a specific hero associated with it. At the start of a campaign you will have a total of 12 heroes to choose from, but only a ranger will be unlocked for the first time you play. As you progress in the game and make specific decisions in events, you will unlock others. Like with the units and towers, you are at the mercy of the RNG as to what heroes you gain in your quests, which is dependent on what towns you choose to save. When it comes to unlocking new heroes to select at the start of the campaign, however, you do this by choosing different event options or choosing a specific option a certain number of times. It is a case of trial and error as to whether or not you unlock a new hero, but it adds to the replayability of the game while also encouraging you to try new options in the events as opposed to just keeping to the choices that you know. Because of this, it results in the game being different each time you play, as there is always new outcomes as your event choices change, and adds a great deal of excitement. Each of the heroes have their own strengths, weaknesses and special abilities. For example, the ranger is an all-out damage dealer, resulting in low health and armor, while the paladin has low health but high armor and average damage. With each of the heroes having their own strengths and weakness really changes up how you play the game in accordance to what hero types are in the army. Each of their special abilities work very differently, resulting in you needing to change how to tackle oncoming waves in accordance with what abilities you have available to you. For example, if you have a ranger, 2 paladins and 2 berserkers, it is a pretty straightforward full-on charge, with the ranger staying in the back shooting fire arrows, while the paladins take the damage and increase the berserkers' defense, and the berserkers dish out the main damage. While if you have a ranger, 2 alchemists and 2 paladins, you will need to change that head-on attack to a more conservative strategy where units become the main melee force, as the alchemist and ranger will just get slaughtered if surrounded by enemies. So yes, your tactics need to change in accordance with the heroes you have available, adding some complexity to the game and a whole lot of replayability. Heroes also have the ability to carry an item. Some of these items are permanent while others are one use, such as bombs or spells. Permanent items generally grant bonuses such as increased damage, armor and the likes, along with granting additional bonuses each day in very small amounts, and cost a lot more gold when buying from the black market caravan when it arrives. One use items on the other hand are much cheaper. They don't add a whole lot of additional strategy to the game, but they are a nice touch nevertheless, with some helping you in surprising and interesting ways. Heroes can also level up as they defeat enemy units to a maximum level of 12. When a hero levels up, you get a choice of 2 random stats to increase, which is damage, armor, energy, which is used for special abilities, and health. While far less complex than that of other games, it allows the player to have some freedom in developing the heroes of the game and works reasonably well with fitting your heroes into specific roles, such as a DPS role or a role as a tank. Units also have a level up system with a maximum level of 4, but unlike heroes, you have no freedom of choosing how they become stronger. It results in them gaining more power both in attack and defense, resulting in you needing to prioritize in keeping them alive over the lesser levels, as they are much more effective overall. Having this small detail results in you needing to keep an eye on such units and make sure they don't fall in combat, ensuring that you make them retreat if things are looking hairy. It adds a small bit of much needed depth to the overall strategy of the game, and becomes essential in the likes of the harder difficulty setting. Overall, the towers, units and heroes of ValeGuard work very well. The randomness as to what units you have and won't be for everyone, especially those looking for more complexity. But from a more casual strategy perspective, it adds enough complexity without alienating those who love strategy games but are not tactical masterminds, like me for instance. Along with that, the RNG nature of the game adds a whole lot of replayability, which is needed due to the full campaign from beginning to end only being about 4 hours long. The management of ValeGuard isn't for everyone, but if you are looking for a strategy game that is a little bit different, while not over complex, then it is definitely going to provide that. Finally is the FTL style events that occur throughout the game. After assigning work for the day, there is a chance of either the enemy attacking the town, an uneventful night, or an event activating. When an event activates, you will be given a description of what is happening and a number of options to choose from based on that specific event. Each option has a number of different outcomes, as to which outcome you receive is completely random, with there being a positive, negative, or neutral consequence. Positives often revolve around gaining additional resources, boosts, hero items, or unlocking new heroes. Negatives result in losing resources, an attack on the town, losing population, and so on and so forth. Neutrals of course end with there being no good or bad outcome. The events add an exciting twist and a level of unpredictability to the game, where you never know what way things are going to go. Unlike other games such as Space Time for example, the events don't harm you to a catastrophic level. There was never a point in the game where an event completely changed the tides, and I found myself in a position of great advantage or disadvantage. While more confident and experienced strategists will see this as a bad thing, for a game that is suited more for the casual strategy gamers, it works very well. It results in the game never getting to a stressful level, meaning that no matter the outcome of events, the game is still as laid back as it always is, which is exactly what a casual experience should be. But at the same time, the events are impacting enough that they do change up how you need to strategize, by delaying construction due to losing lumber, or delaying buying a unit after losing money. It works very well, but won't be impacting enough for everyone to enjoy. If there was one thing to criticise with the events, it would be that there simply isn't enough of them. Very often the exact same event can activate multiple times in the same mission. This is certainly nothing new, it happens in all games with this system, but it occurs a lot more frequent in ValeGuard's case. It isn't a deal breaker, but it results in the event system not reaching its full potential, and realistically there could be a whole lot more done with it. And I hope that more are added into the game, as a bigger variety would really help stop the over repetition that often happens. Then there is the RTS aspect of the game. How this works is that at the end of each day, after assigning work to your town's population, there is a chance that the enemy will attack your town. An attack can come from one single path or several separate paths at the same time. You will always know exactly where the enemy will be coming from, as a mist will form at the entrance of the path or paths, allowing you to prepare in advance, but never really knowing when the next attack is going to actually arrive. When it comes to attacking the enemy, like most RTS games, towers work automatically. targeting anything that is within its range. Units on the other hand would only attack enemies automatically if they come within a certain range of them and mostly need to be manually controlled. You can select a specific unit by using either keys such as 1 to 5 for heroes and F1 to F9 for troops, and then right click on the enemy you want them to attack. Alternatively, you can use the classic method of left clicking and dragging to select a large group of units and then give them orders from there. But to use special abilities, you will need to individually select a unit. The best way to describe the RTS gameplay of ValeGuard would be classic. It is very reminiscent of the old RTS games like Warcraft, Starcraft, KKND and Command & Conquer. You don't have the harvesting units for money or multiple buildings for different units, but as far as the combat goes, it works pretty much the same. The interface for the unit selection is a bit awkward, especially with the F keys, as if you have more than 9 sets of units, your only way to select the 10th or 11th, or whatever number the unit is, you will need to either click and drag on them or select them individually. I don't see why there isn't an F10, F11 or F12 for the unit selecting too. Along with that, there is, as far as I can tell, no way to make custom groups like you can in other RTS games. Usually in an RTS you can easily divide your army into two by selecting one half and pressing Ctrl and a number where your selection will be associated with that number. It allows for easy selection and commanding of that group. ValeGuard doesn't have that, and it can make controlling groups of troops very difficult, especially in the final mission where enemies are often coming from 3 different areas of the map. You often have troops getting tangled up with other groups, and it just makes it hard to coordinate them efficiently. It doesn't ruin the experience, but it is a minor frustration during bigger battles. There is also a bug where sometimes the cursor doesn't line up to the point of activation when clicking. Occasionally you will find that you click somewhere and the point where units will move will be a little bit to the cursor's left or right. This also applies to placing buildings and seems to affect the final level more than others, especially at the top of the fort near Fire Beacon. This isn't a big deal, it just means that occasionally if you're not careful you will place a building in the wrong spot, or your units might end up on the wrong side of a wall. But once you get used to it, and because it is only on occasion it happens, it doesn't cause too many issues. As for the balance, the enemy is very well balanced for the most part. The only exception I would have where tweaking is needed would be the dragons that are part of the demon army. They are fast, they can fly over walls, destroy buildings in 2 or 3 hits, and they take a lot of damage. On a scale of danger, they are more fearsome and destructive than the final boss himself, and when in numbers of 3 or 4, you are sure to lose a few houses unless otherwise very lucky. Overall, however, the RTS side of ValeGuard's gameplay is well done and suited to the casual gaming style. It offers up just about enough RTS combat to keep all strategists of varying experience levels entertained, but veterans of the genre will likely be frustrated due to its simplicity and somewhat awkward interface and group controls. Finally are the difficulty settings of the game. There are 3 difficulty settings to choose from, that being easy, standard and ValeGuard. Standard is an average or medium difficulty that offers some challenge, but nothing that anyone with any sort of strategy experience won't be able to handle with relative ease, while easy is for those who are not accustomed to strategy games in any shape or form. The ValeGuard difficulty, on the other hand, is a whole different beast altogether. It makes enemies far stronger than in the other settings, not in the sense of damage, but in resilience, making even the most basic of enemy units very tank-like. Right now, I feel that the hardest setting needs to be balanced out. It is a mode that is so difficult that even getting through the first level is a massive challenge. The waves of enemies just have too much health, defense, or a mixture of both. So much so that even heroes can only slowly chip away at the easiest of units' health and are easily overwhelmed. It is a shame, as the standard difficulty setting is a bit easy for those who are looking for a decent challenge, but the ValeGuard setting is just too difficult for the casual nature of the game. As a whole, ValeGuard is an exciting mixture of town management and RTS gameplay that, while simple, rather repetitive and a bit clunky with its UI, is an engaging and unique experience. It won't have enough complexity or units to keep the more serious strategy players entertained. For those looking for a more laid-back RTS playstyle, ValeGuard is definitely worth checking out. One of the most outstanding issues with ValeGuard that will affect all players no matter their skill level is the repetition of missions. Throughout the whole campaign there is no change to the mission objectives of each of the towns. The only exception is the second last level of the campaign, where you have the choice of either holding out and taking on the final wave, or getting your workers to build a bridge allowing access to Ironhold. Other than that, it is simply managing your town and hold your ground. The biggest issue this causes is that all the great features that add replayability to the game are lessened by it. No matter how many times you replay the game and unlock new things, there isn't really anything new to experience or enough variety in the missions to make it feel fresh. Even other objectives such as build up stock of X amount of this resource, or obtain X number of units to keep the town safe for when you leave, anything that gets rid of that day's counter once in a while would do. just something more than another case of holding out for X number of days. Along with that, while there is a number of different level layouts, 5 I believe not including the unique final level, that is randomly chosen upon a mission starting, there is little variation in them. Sure, the layout in each is different, but the environment is the same, making each and every one of them feel like the last. It just adds to the repetition. There needs to be more levels for the RNG to choose from, and more with varying atmospheres. Some snow environments, maybe some mountainous terrain, or even some desert levels, and have them affect the way resource gathering works. Like the desert results in food growing faster but less of it due to drought and less wood but more iron. Or snow, where food takes a day or so longer to grow because of the cold but iron is harder to find due to snow cover, lowering how much you get slightly. These are just some ideas that come to mind off the top of my head. Pretty much anything that will help bring some variety to both the missions and the gameplay itself. Other than that, the levels are well designed. They are fair and give the player plenty of room to build, though not too much at the same time, and a long enough path between the enemies entering and reaching your base. If the developer was to add in some variation, the level design would go from decent to great very quickly. The atmosphere to ValeGuard is excellent. There was never a point I felt that the atmosphere was out of place. The main menu theme is a treat and represents the game very well, with its slow yet calm notes, but still has the slow beats of medieval war drums. It gives that sense of the game's casual, more relaxed gameplay while also noting the RTS aspect of the game very well. Then throughout the game during the days segments there is a variety of tracks that play. From a track that has almost fairy tale tone to it that fits in well with the stress-free moments of daytime, while also blending with the colourful and low polygon environments and character design. Then there is also a track that starts off nice and slow before building up with more hard-hitting medieval drums combined with sounds of the violin and hymns to perfectly set the mood, where you're building an army and fortifying a town and that the enemy is coming, you just don't know when. It works so well, fitting in with the casual nature of the game while also portraying the strategy of it. As for the combat, it just ramps everything up tenfold, with the war drum sounds beating at a rapid pace, the sound of medieval war horns and the slow hymns just add to a sense of war and urgency. It makes every battle feel like it is crucial that you win and that humanity rely on your victory. The composer really understood ValeGuard as a game and really felt the game's atmosphere, making a soundtrack that just fits it. Many games have excellent soundtracks that represent it extremely well, but few can ever boast atmospheric perfection, but ValeGuard can. ValeGuard has received quite a lot of negativity towards it as of late, but I feel most of that is due to the misunderstanding of what type of game it is, that being originally classified as an RTS and tower defense game, while actually it is an RTS and town management game. It resulted in people rating the game based on what they are told it is, as opposed to judging it for what it actually is. Is it deserving of the recent criticism it has received? Absolutely not, especially with it being a misunderstanding. It certainly isn't perfect and there are a lot of improvements that can be made to the game, but as a solo developer, they are betterments that will take time. As it stands, ValeGuard is a good game for the more casual of strategy players. It offers up some challenge along with a fair amount of content and plenty of replayability, but its repetitiveness and strategically predictable nature won't suit veterans of the RTS genre, nor will the town management of the game give them the experience they are looking for. But if you are looking for a more laid-back experience that keeps with the fundamentals of the RTS games we know and love, while trying something a bit different, then ValeGuard is likely to be what you're looking for. Despite the game's downfalls and its repetitiveness, it is still a highly addictive game. Maybe not to the point of Civilization's just one more turn addictiveness, but there was never a point, despite its slower pace and lower amounts of combat, that I can say it was boring, and the more I played it, the more I enjoyed it. And with that, I give ValeGuard a 7 out of 10. Casual gaming, even in 2018, is a very misunderstood format within the industry. It is one that has had its controversies and hate, and to some its sheer mention is like cancer. If it isn't complex or intense or has this many of a specific thing, it isn't a real video game. It doesn't belong here, and all that sort of nonsense. But ValeGuard stands as one of the games that proves that a game doesn't need to be complex, intense, or even have a ton of content to stand in the top half of the video game rankings. I have my doubts, but I hope that with time, players will begin to see ValeGuard for what it really is, as opposed to judging it for what it isn't.